Okay, now it's Los Angeles time, 1:30 p.m. And thank you everyone to participate this panel. The panel 6, organized by the University of the West, ISHB. The topic will be challenges of the compassionate actions in the field. And thank you our chair for our psychology department, and Joanne, and as a moderator. So Joanne, you can begin.
Thank you so much, Professor Kuo. Good afternoon, everyone, or greetings wherever you are in the world. My name is Joanne, and I am the Associate Professor and Chair of Psychology at the University of the West in Rosemead, California, which is the flagship university founded by our Master Xing Yun back in 1991. So today we will have 3 expert panelists, Ms. Alison Houghton-Kroll, Dr. Morel Ritaza, and Ms. Giovanna Martinez, who will be sharing with us their expertise, knowledge in the field. And I will let them tell you where they work and what they do later on in our presentations. However, a little bit of an introduction from my end. This is me. I've just said I'm the chair and associate professor at University of the West. And I received my PhD in clinical psychology in 2021 from Jackson State University in Jackson, Mississippi. I'm a proud graduate of HBCU. I'm also a registered psychological associate, meaning I'm a clinician, pre-licensed psychologist. I'm collecting my hours now under the supervision of a clinical neuropsychologist. My areas of specializations are grief, Asian immigrant American, older adults, and sexual and gender minorities mental health. My research interests and areas include resilience and coping in sexual and gender minorities, or we usually say SGMs, or the more common term LGBTQIA+ populations. I am also very interested in holistic healing and spirituality. I present workshops regularly in communities in English and Chinese Mandarin, and I'll be trying to do it in Cantonese in January. I am a certified yoga instructor and a regular mindfulness practitioner. I'm also a proud member of Free Mom Hugs, a national organization, and I'm part of the Los Angeles chapter. What do? We go out into the community and show support to people who need them, especially among the LGBTQIA+ populations. And I'm also a social media coordinator and a new board member of Basset Hound Rescue of Southern California. It's an animal rescue that rescues just Basset Hounds only, mainly, sometimes other breeds when we know that they are on the list of euthanasia. And if we can jump in, we will. I've also recently become a committee member of the Los Angeles County Psychological Association Diversity and Social Justice Committee. We just held our first diversity training, and we will be planning on our second one in January. So you notice that I only highlight one area, and that's the only day job per se that pays my bills. All the other things here, I invest with my heart and soul, and I get rewarded in slobby kisses from the doggies, and of course, hugs from people that I love and protect. And that's the theme of what I'm going to talk about before I introduce our esteemed panelists. I want to talk a little bit about compassion-driven work, which in my terms, in other words, volunteering. But first thing first, what is compassion? So when we talk about compassion, we also think about empathy. Are they the same thing? Not exactly. Empathy is when we have the understanding of the other person's experience by imagining ourselves in their position. For example, someone has just lost a loved one. We may not have that experience before, but we have had the feeling of devastation. We have had the feelings of loss, so that we'll be able to understand the person's experience without personally going through the event in life. So what is compassion? Compassion, in my opinion, is the next level. Not only we have the empathy of the experience, but because of the empathy, we are then having the desire or the will to take action to help the other person. or to make improvements to the situation. So research shows that there are 3 levels of empathy, and I would like to use a little bit of my anecdotal experience and some research, scholarly experience or informed opinions to help us understand which 3 levels are. In fact, I first learned about these 3 levels of empathy when I was a full-time employee at YWCA San Gabriel Valley, and I was participating in a national conference about how to increase empathy in our work. So cognitive empathy, it's something that most of us have. For example, you know that someone has just lost someone. Let's use the same example. You would understand that that is a unusual life event, a time that the person would need understanding, some support. For example, if you're a supervisor of a person at work who has just lost their parent, you will show the cognitive empathy and say, you know what, maybe you should take a day off. You don't have to come to meeting or work today. Cognitive empathy. Sorry, let me go back a little bit. Emotional therapy is also known as emotional contagion. It's contagious. You just told me that you've lost your mom. I am impacted by that event myself because I feel as a fellow human and I feel sad. I may cry with you. I may hold your hand. I may process at that moment that life event with you. And that next level, compassionate empathy. It's understanding the feelings and therefore taking appropriate action to help. If I were to use the same example, I may understand that being a supervisor, my subordinate, or the person, my coworker, it's a person who lives alone and does not have anyone else to help her with the meals. I may take action and bring her meals on a daily basis and help in the other actions to help her cope with the mourning or the grieving period. If we were to take this even further, we might sign up for some grief support learning group and help this person to cope with this period and maybe become a leader in the compassionate world, learning how to help others cope with grief. So these 3 levels of empathy are all ways of expressing our care for another person, but where do we show what kind of actions at which level or stage? So as I said, I would like to use my portion to highlight a little bit more on volunteering work, which I call it compassion-driven work. The very outstanding component is that when we do work, whether it's compassion-driven, volunteer, paid work, there are bound to be a burnout. In volunteering, the burnout is mostly affiliated to efficacy or lack of efficacy, cynicism, and exhaustion. May I elaborate just a little bit on those 3? Efficacy is about the level of competency. For example, if I were to be hired to be a behavior coordinator to assess dog behaviors upon surrendering of hounds, I was actually one of the assistants to do such thing. I've never had any formal training. While I love dogs, while I've had experiences handling dogs, I am not the most qualified person to do that. So I may love that volunteering work, but because of the lack of efficacy, I may not be lasting on that volunteer work. I may become cynical, meaning I don't trust the value or the vision or the mission of the job or the organization anymore. And definitely I can become exhausted because of the hours and time and energy invested in that kind of work. Now, the new generation and attitude towards volunteering. I have now since become a board member. I recruit volunteers for Basset Hound Rescue of Southern California, and I am overjoyed to see younger generation joining us. However, as a Gen X, I also notice the differences in attitude in volunteering. Many of them join me and leave me in 6 months. They love our work. They love the nature of the organization. They were all dog lovers. but because they were between jobs or they were new graduates, and they know that volunteering, which we highly promote, that is a good item to add to your resume. And therefore, they volunteered to have the item on the resume. Many of them would love to stay, but unfortunately, because they are young, they need, or they feel that there's a need to find a full-time job, and therefore they would join us and leave us. And of course, there will be also time that they would need to carve out of their social schedule, which is not always available among younger generations as compared to retired personnel. While those are extrinsic motivation, which are factors that can be removed, well, and that, I mean, as in the motivation, the level of motivation will be lowered when those factors are removed. For example, you find a job, the motivation is not there to volunteer anymore, or you now have a bigger social schedule, you now no longer have time for volunteering. Those are the factors that will lead to a higher burnout rate. Whereas intrinsic motivation, something that we align our values and understanding, or life satisfaction, or the beliefs in the integration in the organization, will help volunteers stay on the line of job. Resources are some of the challenges that we have in volunteering or compassion-driven work. We know that it's not easy to raise funds. It's not easy to find volunteers. And when we do find them, we may not find them with the exact talents that we need. And absolutely time, we all only have 24 hours in the day. And while we have a whole life going on outside volunteering, how much more time can we then direct to something that we are really and truly passionate about? So how do we cultivate compassion? I hope the panel and the information that we will learn from each other today will be able to help point us to some answers. But at this moment, I really think that it should be coming from a point of inspiring the next generation while keeping ourselves motivated. We should be role modeling how volunteering should be carried out. My sons, my 3 young sons, follow me to almost every volunteering event in my Best at Home rescue. And I don't think they have the same love that I do have for my Basset Hounds, but they do know that volunteering, it's a great way to spend their healthy time. I learned volunteering through my mom myself. Community outreach is also one way that we can find more talents and human resources. Last but not least, if we role model our acts of compassionate living, we can also help underscore that we are living a life that's worth living while we are helping others. I'll come back to these 3 notions later on when we conclude, but I think this is now the time for us to introduce our very first expert panelist. Allison, if you're ready, I will stop sharing and introduce our next speaker. I think you're still seeing my screen, right?
No, you're good. So Alison, can you share your screen?
All right, while she gets her screen started, may I please officially introduce her? Alison is originally from Australia, and she graduated from the University of Queensland, Australia, with a Bachelor of Economics, then worked as an economist in the Australian Treasury for 3 years. She traveled extensively and lived in the UK, working for a nonprofit in the newly liberated Eastern Europe. She then completed a Master of Arts in Theology at Fuller Seminary in Pasadena, California, before working as the Assistant Director of Distance Learning and Online Programs for Fuller, as well as being a Spiritual Director. Alison then worked as a life coach, supporting adolescents, as well as volunteering at the Suicide Prevention Center, SPC, in Los Angeles. For the last 3 years, she has been working as a supervisor at SPC. Alison is currently in her 2nd year of a Master's of Arts degree in MFT, Marriage and Family Therapy at University of the West. She's one of our very own, and she's committed to working with suicidal adolescents and young adults through individual, group, and family therapy. Take it away, Alison.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah, okay, sorry. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate today. I'm really delighted to share with you the work that I have the honor and privilege of doing as a supervisor at the Didi Hirsch Suicide Prevention Center here in Los Angeles. The work that I do is I regularly take crisis calls myself. I supervise other people who are taking calls, and I train volunteers. So volunteering is a really dear to my heart work that we do. And when necessary, I initiate emergency service interventions. That's a very small part of what we do, but sometimes it's really necessary. I just want to tell you a little bit about Didi Hirsch as an organization. It was founded in 1958. It is the home of the first and the largest suicide prevention center in the nation. We respond to more calls, chats, and texts than any other center in the United States. It's always been an innovator in the area of suicide prevention. And in 2022, we led the launch in California of 988, which is the new easy to remember 3-digit number for Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. We are the only center in the US who has English and Spanish counselors available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we also have a line that is dedicated solely for Korean speakers. We offer comprehensive suicide support services, such as individual and group counseling, training, and outreach in local communities and schools. We also offer follow-up services. So if someone is having suicidal thoughts are in high risk, we have someone who'll call them back within the day or within 2 days, depending on their risk. We also partner with local hospitals such as UCLA and Cedars-Sinai to support people who've come into the emergency room with suicidal ideation or have made attempts. We have a crisis line for teens that is answered by teens, so it's for teens. We also pioneered and spearheaded 911 diversion programs whereby crisis callers who call in are diverted from 911 to the crisis line so that rather than triggering a law enforcement response, they are supported by trained crisis counselors. And this model is now being used throughout the United States, in other major cities. So it's this compassion and vision of our founder, Didi Hirsch, which is continued. And that's our commitment to service that's sort of driving our support for crisis needs throughout LA, Riverside, Orange, and Ventura counties. We serve quite a large area. So I sort of think about Brene Brown has always been someone who's been very influential in my reading in my life. She says that compassion's not a virtue, it's like a commitment that we have. It's not something we have or don't have. It's something that we choose to practice. And it's a deeply held belief that we are inextricably connected by something rooted in love and goodness. And empathy is that skill set that brings compassion alive. And empathy is something that touches something within us that communicates to another person, you are not alone. Empathy is foundational to the work that we do at the crisis line. People who call us are desperate, scared, and alone. Some are crying and afraid, and others are just completely hollowed out and have nothing emotionally left. Many are afraid that they cannot keep themselves safe, and some who call have already taken an action to harm themselves when they call. They call because they're alone with their pain and they have no one to reach out to. They're afraid to talk to their loved ones, afraid of burdening them with thoughts, and scared of overwhelming the people they love. Others have been in pain for so long that they feel like everyone in their life is exhausted by their problems and that they don't have anyone left to call. Some have been struggling with suicidal thoughts for years through some combination of mental illness, abuse, or trauma. Others have a series of life events like divorce, death of a loved one, financial adversity, or drugs. And the combination of these stresses have sort of accumulated and thrust their life into some dizzying spiral. and they feel like they're drowning. For some, I'm the very first person that they've ever told that they're having thoughts of taking their lives. While for others, they have lived with these thoughts for years and years, and they are both scared and exhausted by them. With each of these callers, each with their own unique story, each with a varying level of distress and at different levels of risk for taking their lives, they all feel as if they're drowning in their pain. But by reaching out, there is with them a degree of ambivalence about taking their lives, which we at the crisis line can grasp onto and nurture and support. What binds them all together is their desire for connection and their desire to feel less alone in the darkness. Most people who are suicidal don't want to die so much as they want that intense pain that often can feel as if their whole body is on fire. They want that pain to stop. And this pain that engulfs them is so all-encompassing that they have lost hope that it will ever end. And it is the offering of warmth and connection that holds them when they reach out to us as if when they're drowning. Yes, I am here, I am listening. And this is the first and most vital step in helping them de-escalate and stay safe. So Brené Brown talks about the difference between sympathy and empathy. And sympathy is standing at the top of a dark hole and calling down to a person at the bottom, saying, well, wow, it looks bad down there. Can I do anything for you? While empathy is the vulnerability of climbing down into that hole to join them at the dark pit of despair. It is being with them. It is being prepared to offer a non-judgmental space, seeing the world from their perspective, feeling their emotions, and being able to communicate that you have seen and heard their pain. It is truly being with them, feeling with them there in that dark space, what it's like to have that despair and hopelessness. For the crisis worker, on every call, we have to kind of go into that dark hole with this tiny flashlight and slowly illuminate what is down there in that dark space. We have to find out why they called, what is going on, who matters to them, what their small sliver of hope might be. And we do that sliver by sliver, moment by moment, illuminating that dark space. And it requires a deep level of vulnerability and connecting with something in ourselves. And what I have learned from taking thousands of calls, that there is something magical in having someone deeply listening to you and to know that you have been heard and understood. When you're in that dark place, to know that you're not alone, that place feels like there's like maybe a small glimmer of hope that this pain maybe could end. And even after all these years and all these thousands of calls I've personally taken, and even more that I've listened into and supervised, it never ceases to move me to tears how offering someone, a sacred space of being seen and heard and listened to can de-escalate a crisis and help someone take that next small step forward, however small. And in doing so, it breaks that kind of crisis, that bubble that happens. And that's all that it takes to help someone stay safe for today. And that's the difference between someone acting on their thoughts and taking their life or not. How it can be the difference between a young man jumping from a third-story parking garage at 4 a.m. and going home to his family instead. The difference between a middle-aged man in utter despair alone in his house with a gun in his hand because his wife has left him and taking his children, and putting down that gun and reaching out for help. The difference between a wild-eyed, frightened teen on an overpass wanting to jump, calling 911 and getting to safety. It is such a sacred honor for someone to share their story of pain. And I'm always incredibly mindful of this, that this is someone's mother, someone's father, their husband, their wife, their sister and son. And I treat every caller as if they are someone in my family, as I would want my family to be treated. Suicide is the 11th leading cause of death in the US and the third leading cause of death for people aged 15 to 24. On average, 135 people die every day from suicide in the US. And with the advent of the visibility of 988, our call volume has increased greatly. Our call center has taken 198,888 calls and texts this year so far as of yesterday. And the need for volunteers and crisis counselors and supervisors has grown enormously. We do outreach to schools, universities, businesses to train people in how to recognize the signs of suicide, how to support people going through crisis. We offer trainings in person and online, and we provide opportunities for volunteers. We could not do it. We have paid crisis counselors and supervisors, but we couldn't do it without our volunteers. Our training for our volunteers, and I began as one, is really excellent. And a lot of the work I do is after they've done their initial training, they then have a 12-week apprenticeship, and I spend a lot of time training them on every single call, supporting them, listening in on every call. And we do a lot of work teaching them how to take a call, but also supporting them emotionally as well, because this work we do is exhausting and draining, and at times it's heartbreaking. And we rely heavily on our volunteers, training them how to manage their emotional selves during calls and after calls. We take seriously the impact that this emotional work can take on our staff and our volunteers, and we work diligently to offer emotional spaces and real resources for people to get the support they need so they can continue to, do this work that we do and that we care so deeply about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Allison. That was wonderful. And thank you for what you do for the community. Our next presenter is Dr. Mariel Ritaza. As she begins to share her screen, allow me to introduce Dr. Ritaza. Besides her medical doctoral degree, she also holds a Master of Science degree in Health Policy and Law, and she is the Executive Director at the National Asian Pacific American Families Allied for Substance Awareness and Harm Reduction, and that's abbreviated as NAPAFASA. Dr. Ritaza is 1.5 generation Filipino American. Founded in 1988 in Maryland, NAPAFASA's mission involves reducing the harms of substance misuse and other addictions through research, community education, youth leadership, technical assistance, civic engagement, and advocacy. NAPAFASA is based in Alhambra, California. The mic is yours, Dr. Ritaza.
Thank you, Dr. Ko. My name is Dr. Mariel Ritaza. My pronouns are she, sha. And sha, for those of you who don't know, is the only pronoun we have in my native language, which is Tagalog. It is the only one we have. So sha it is. I put together this presentation before the elections, and I have to say, thinking about compassion today is very difficult because of all the mixed feelings I have. And, I think you'll see in my 15 minutes that I'll sum up all of our work is why involvement in politics is so important and why the way that we address behavioral health, including mental health, suicide, substance use disorder, it is very much impacted by a government system. As much as we'd like to say no, and, having been a teacher, having been a physician, having been a researcher, and now in nonprofit, there's no way to separate it. I've tried to run away from policy in every single career, and here I am. So thank you for having me. So this presentation is called From Against to Allied, Rethinking Education, Community Power, Systems Change to Reduce Substance Use Disorder. And I really wanted to, first of all, talk about the way that we changed our name from Against to Allied. So recently we had rebranded, and we had done this, we'd taken this change really within the last 3 years, and during COVID, and really understanding what was happening with the ongoing mental health crisis, the opioid crisis. Nothing was working. Not that things don't work, but I think that when we are working so closely and so tightly in our own bubbles, we forget to see the bigger picture, and a lot gets lost in translation. So today's agenda, I'll be talking about Napa FASA, a little bit about what we do, priorities and projects, challenges. Now what? So here is our previous logo. Again, we were established in 1988, National Asian Pacific American Families Against Substance Abuse. And in July of this year, the Board of Supervisors approved our motion. Really, it was the entire staff and I and myself to change our name to the National Asian Pacific American Families Allied for Substance Awareness and Harm Reduction. So unfortunately, our name has not gotten shorter, but we have kept the same acronym because we can't change too much. I think we're all going to get confused. Our names are very long. And again, this is in response to what's happening in the community. What we find is you can talk about data, you can talk about policy, but when it comes down to it, what moves people are stories, is humanity, and you get the most of that from people with lived and living experiences. And when you allow them to lead, and you give them opportunities to lead, and you make it accessible for them, you'd be really surprised how you think about this work. And by the way, being an immigrant, I didn't even know that you can get paid during nonprofit work. I was like, what, isn't that all free? You can get paid. So you should volunteer, but you can also get paid to do what you love. So we're dedicated to mental health and advocacy through research, public health. I'm not going to go over this because Dr. Crow had already spoken a lot about this, but a little bit about ourselves. We have 4 full-time staff, 3 part-time staff, 1 intern, and 5 board of directors. So the 5 board of directors act as my boss collectively to make sure that they're also watching the entire organization, that we're aligned with our mission, and that for any reason, I am not acting corruptly, I think you believe that there'd be those issues. Now, to compassionately address substance misuse, I talked about addressing the lived and living experiences of people who use drugs, people who have this life experience. And, yeah, sure, substance use and substance misuse has some kind of genetic congenital component, but also there are a lot of these socioeconomic factors that create life challenges that, Allison had already alluded to, that really impact our mental health, our sense of well-being, which is very much dependent on the environment and what we have access to. So for instance, very relevant today, it's also impacted by access to education, status, class, caste, gender, sexuality, race, ethnicity, age. I mean, these are a lot of these things, actually, I want you to look at this list. I want you to think about what do you have in control of in any of this list? Mental health is a political issue. So organizational priorities, when I think about priorities and when we meet for strategic planning and we discuss among our staff, what do people need to sustain their agency, their well-being? It's not enough. Wellness and being in recovery isn't just about I'm absent of a DSM-5 diagnosis, right? I don't, it's not just not having mental illness or any kind of diagnosis. How do we thrive? How do we live well? I don't want to just survive. Nobody does. So we do a lot of things: research, community outreach, education, training for professionals, clinicians, including providing continuing education for clinicians. We have youth-led projects, including research, healing through the arts, cultural arts, advocacy for policy change, and civic engagement. And there are really multiple ways to approach this, but I like to think about it in two big categories. We have self-empowerment and community empowerment. So self-empowerment comes from within, right? Because you must be, in order to be part of a community empowerment system, you also have to believe in that for yourself. So you've got to do the work. You have to do the work on yourself. And part of that is, addressing what health justice is. What does it mean to have access to healthcare? Why do we need access to healthcare? What happens when people don't have access to healthcare and they wait, and suddenly they have to go to the emergency room because guess what? They don't have access to their primary care physician, which is a huge issue in the US. We encourage connection and safe risk-taking using healing through the arts. A lot of young people come to me and they say, we don't have any third spaces. We don't know where to go. What do we do? These third spaces are gone. People don't go to these places anymore, or they've been taken away. A lot of them closed down during COVID. So how do you get to experiment as a young person and learn who you are and become self-confident? Encourage cultural connection and identity awareness, as well as cross-generational and cross-community dialogue. A lot of our work also involves intergenerational trauma. And it's a big part of mental health or addressing mental health in Asian American and Pacific Islander communities, because we often stigmatize it. It's not talked about. And so when we don't talk about it, we can't address it. And in fact, the number one preventable cause of death among AAPI youth aged 15 to 24 is suicide. We also develop leaders at our organization. You can't do it by yourself. You've got to build everyone, and you've got to be generous about it. Give people a chance. Do something good for your intern. Don't just give them paperwork. Give them something meaningful. And for community, we look at the cultural and the cultural responsiveness of behavioral health service. A lot of this we do in advocacy. Language access is a big thing. There are over 50 ethnic groups that are part of the Asian American Pacific Islander diaspora, and over 100 spoken languages and dialects. And we also share tools for systems change, because again, this is a community effort. You can't do this alone, and everyone has a unique part to play. So here we have research. So this was our table before we changed our name. So as you can see, this was actually the San Gabriel Lunar New Year. That's why we have the Year of the Rabbit. And it was supposed to be like a pin a tail on the donkey, but you have to find creative ways to get data. And sometimes we play games, and occasionally our funders allow us to give gift cards. We also do a version of modified focus groups. And here's one from our intergenerational trauma session. What's been successful in helping you connect across generations? And you've got 3 different colors here because you've got 3 different age groups. So you've got youth, middle age, and elder. Now, I'm not going to tell you who's youth, middle age, and I'm not going to get in trouble for that. So we let people self-identify. And then you review the different colors, and you come to the realization that you're concerned about so many things, but just haven't had a chance to talk about it or don't know how. And I find that they want to talk about it. We just don't have the skills. And that's okay, because we don't really teach them. It's not really one person's fault. The photo on the left is we presented, and Pia Antoinette Vasquez, so she's there sitting next to me. She's I'm like trying to point like you can see, but she's she's just to my left side by the poster, and she developed this study. She led the implementation, and then she presented it at the 2024 UCLA Health Equity Conference. And this was just looking at binge drinking and substance use across transitional age youth, which is generally 16 to 26, give or take. Now, why is this age group so important? Well, they're transitioning from childhood to adulthood. And this is a lot of the population that I work with who graduate from college, and they think, wow, I've dedicated my entire life to school and I don't have life skills. Or I know this is an issue, but I didn't develop these research skills because nobody ever taught me. It wasn't part of the curriculum. And, you know, I taught in high school back when No Child Left Behind was implemented. And I think about the state of education and how people can't read today because we were graduating people to the next level without them actually being qualified. And that's what it did. That's what it did. So here we have harm reduction for Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. I was asked to do this presentation with Sal Deaf, the Sikh community, and they asked me to come to Fremont Gurdwara. And we didn't know how it was going to go because they had never spoken about this issue before, but it came out of a need because it happened in community and they didn't know what to do. And for the first time, we talked about it. We talked about everything. We talked about body shaming. We talked about, you know, what do our parents say? What do we say to our daughters? What do we say to our sons? We even talked about, is alcohol even a drug? What is a drug? When is it misused? When is it not? When is it a disorder? And then here we also work across generations. And so here's our needs assessment at the Doherty Senior Center. Our staff loves volunteering. We love, well, volunteer, they're also paid, but we love going to the senior center. And I grew up with my elders and I thought it was the best time because, you know, grandma and grandpa say things and they don't care. And it's like all the knowledge that you get is great. And I always loved that. And so I love to bring that into our work because that's how we do community in our cultures. We come together and we eat. And then we do community outreach, of course. And here is our Healing Hearts community session. And so this one, I think, was one of our first ones. We actually here have one of the students from UWest, and they came to visit us and join our group and just talk about, okay, I think this issue was, how do we do self-care? Yeah, this was our opening one because we were going to start with intergenerational trauma. And we're like, maybe we should ease up a little bit, you know, going hard very fast. And then, of course, community empowerment. So I want everyone in my staff and who comes through our doors, interns, and as much as I can, volunteers, to have opportunities to lead and to speak, because young folks don't get practice if we don't give them the tools, and then we don't give them the chance to practice. And you've got to give them a chance because they want to do it. And then here on the right is, we were in Philadelphia for the presidential town hall earlier this year, which is very interesting. Then we have here one of our other Healing Through the Arts program. We have Zoe Kane. Zoe Kane's actually a social media and White House recognized artist. And here she is helping Auntie make a zine to tell her story in Monterey Park at the Senior Center. We have here youth, young folks, high school students participating for Alhambra Day of Service. We love to hire local artists who are unknown, promote their work. So here's DJ Leo. He always DJs for our events. And then also we have here an art piece that was created by Cesar Marquez for our issue of Pulse, which is our newsletter, Indigenous Resistance. And Cesar Marquez actually was he wasn't one of my students when I taught high school, but he would come into my class and I'd, you know, so even though he was in another class, and eventually we just kept in touch. Like I kept in touch with a lot of my students, and they're all a lot of them are in Los Angeles, which is where I am. On the left here is now our civic engagement piece for policy and systems change. So here we have on the very left, we have some staff that I've worked with in previous organizations as well, meeting with California State Congress members in Sacramento to advocate about public health initiatives. And then on the very right, you've got the roundtable with U.S. Secretary Javier Becerra, from the Department of Health and Human Services, and the White House Initiative on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. Here we are talking about our concerns, our issues about our respective work. And I am in the back you can see by the flag, but it stars, the American flag, the stars. I'm right there. I know I blend in. I'm usually in the front, but like, you know, I was one of the taller ones, and so they put me in the back. Now there's a lot of challenges. I think we've seen that. I don't think I have to elaborate, and it's complicated. A lot of these things have already been mentioned by the speakers before me, right? So resources, we just don't have enough. We'll never have enough. Policies take a long time to pass, and they often don't. They often don't. And I can talk more about that another time. Shifting cultural beliefs and norms takes education, patience, leadership, willingness to change behavior, that includes ourselves, and to be vulnerable, that includes ourselves. And as I experienced all this week, tears, anger, and then the science is confusing, whatever you want to call science. We know that not everyone agrees. And as Dr. Ko had already mentioned, burnout is easy. So what? We have all these events, and I can talk all about them, but I think as we close, and I'll just end it here, as we close, I think about this. What is compassion? You know, we all have to start from within to be able to be part of the whole. And so I encourage everyone to, when something difficult comes up, instead of reacting, wait and be curious about what that brings for you. Why is this coming up? We all have to do it. And it's not easy, but that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ritaza, or I know fondly as Morel. We are actually friends, and she taught psychopharmacology last semester or last year with us at UWest. She's one of the most energetic, most vibrant person, as you can see through her presentations. I appreciate you sharing with us on that, Professor, and please stay for the question and answer round. I'm sure there will be opportunities to expand on some of those points. While we wait for our next esteemed panelist, Giovanna Martinez from YWCA San Gabriel Valley, allow me to introduce her as she starts to share her screen. Giovanna is the Associate Director of Domestic Violence Programs at YWCA San Gabriel Valley in Covina, California. She has over 23 years of experience supporting victims of violence and abuse with the focus of trauma, recovery, and relationship education since June 2001. She is currently the Associate Director of the Domestic Violence Programs at the YWCA of San Gabriel Valley. Previously, she served as a Victim Services Supervisor at various organizations where she developed programs for diverse populations, including children and LGBTQ+ survivors. As the founding program manager for DV services at the LGBTQ+ Center of Long Beach, Jill created the first intimate partner violence or IPV specific services for their organization. Additionally, she spent 14 years as a youth services coordinator at the domestic violence shelter in Long Beach, where she collaborated with local law enforcement to provide crisis services. Jill has established support groups for youth and actively participates in community outreach efforts to educate students about intimate partner violence with LGBTQ+ communities. She serves on 3 boards, including Anne's Abuse Long Beach and the Los Angeles Domestic Violence Council, where she co-chairs the LGBTQIA+ committee. Jill recently earned her master's in social work. Congratulations from Arizona State University, further strengthening her commitment to helping survivors. Take it away, Jill.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here, and what amazing presentations I get to follow. I'd just like to talk a little bit about the YWCA in San Gabriel Valley and discussing kind of our mission, because it really aligns when we talk about compassion-driven work. Our mission at the YWCA San Gabriel Valley is to eliminate racism, empower women, families, and communities, all while promoting peace, justice, and freedom and dignity for all. And it's one of the reasons I was driven to come to the YWCA. As my bio was recently shared, a lot of my work specifically has been in mainstream domestic violence. And when I say mainstream domestic violence, I'm talking about working in organizations like the YWCA that are committed to serving everyone. But a core part of my work has been working in culturally specific organizations, such as the LGBTQ Center in Long Beach. And one of those reasons was because being able to provide services for a community that reflected me was really important for my work. I've been working in domestic violence for over 22 years, and to be able to provide services for someone who shared my life experience or equally was part of my community was something that really drove me to continue to build and create programs. More than anything, I'm a mom of 2 girls. I've been married to my wife for 12 years. Please call me Gio, everyone does, and I use she and aya pronouns. Some of our programs at the YWCA include our domestic violence program. Our domestic violence program is multifaceted. We not only have residential, non-residential programs, but we also provide counseling for children and families. We support it with legal services. We support with mental health therapy. It's all encompassing and it's all absolutely free. We're one of a few organizations that not only has emergency shelter beds, but also has transitional beds for survivors. So once a survivor has left a domestic violence situation, in many cases, we're able to support to those second steps through transitional living. We also have a very robust senior services program. If you're in California in the San Gabriel Valley, you've probably seen one of our Meals on Wheels trucks. We proudly serve our community through case management, meal programs, and telephone assistance. And one of our main core programs is our racial and social justice movement. We've been on a lifetime quest, the YWCA as a whole, to eliminate racism and stand up for social justice and empower communities. And in the last few years, our organization has really moved forward on focusing on education and awareness and campaigns, not only for staff training, but also we formed an internal racial justice task force that meets every month to ensure equity and support for all in our organization and outside of our organization. Additional programs that we have at the Y are transitional age youth. We're able to offer free services specialized to youth between the ages of 16 to 24, which include case management, assisting with employment, education, life skill goals. We collaborate with the community. We actually have a youth ambassador program through this transitional age youth program. We have behavioral health therapy. We're able to provide individual counseling to survivors, not only domestic violence survivors, our senior services program, and many other victims of crime. And as an organization, we are the backbone to Healthy San Gabriel Valley. It's a coalition where the YWCA sustains a regional movement and promotes cross-sector collaboration in order to address economic and social conditions that influence our health outcomes. I know as we're discussing compassion for us, really, especially when we're talking about the victim services and support for our survivors, we really talk about how we use compassion through a trauma-informed care lens. And so when we discuss trauma-informed, we always want to take a step back and recognize that before trauma-informed care became a standard practice, there were so many misconceptions of trauma. You know, trauma was considered to be abnormal. You know, not everyone experienced trauma. Trauma was misunderstood, and the impact of what that had on someone's mental health, physical health was almost often underestimated. And treatment-focused symptoms were more often than not treated than exploring the origins of the trauma. Providers who worked within this sector were many times unprepared. Not having been able to train on issues of trauma, many folks felt uncomfortable speaking to survivors, and many clients did not recognize trauma. They did not recognize trauma and the impacts that trauma had on their lives. So as we moved forward as not only a community of a domestic violence movement, but within our organization, championing trauma-informed care was really important for us, because it really calls us to discuss what that looks like, what trauma-informed care and really compassion through this work looks like. And it calls us to recognize the widespread impacts and understand potential pathways for recovery. So we really have to take a step back and look at how is this trauma affecting our organization, the people we serve, how can we support them in a way that leads with compassion, that allows them to show up authentically as themselves. It helps us recognize the signs of trauma in clients that we serve, and families, and even our staff. Many folks have said before me, you know, trauma creates burnout. Working within community and folks who are experiencing trauma and other adverse reactions creates burnout, especially when your work is being a compassionate witness to someone else's trauma, right? And so it helps us to recognize those signs and symptoms as we're involved in this work, so that we can respond by fully integrating this knowledge about trauma, but not only in policies and procedures, but how we move forward as individuals in this work. And as we do that, we call to resist re-traumatization of the survivors that we work with, of the children and the family who we care for. And as trauma-informed care comes through within our client care, we seek to create a supportive environment where people feel respected, understood, where we build trust and rapport through empathy. We are demonstrating our values and how we respect our clients and their feelings and their perspectives. And when we show up to this, we show up with active listening, reflecting back emotions when we're giving this opportunity to show the client that we are here for them, and give this opportunity again for them to show up and know that we are able to support them and we're on the same page. And another main consideration for trauma-informed care is allowing the survivor to regain their personal power. You know, when we talk about domestic violence is very much an abuse where someone's power has been personally taken away from them. So working through this compassionate trauma-informed care lens helps us support the survivor in regaining their personal power. So we seek to encourage and empower our clients to make their own decisions, educate themselves on the effects of domestic violence, and how to support their families. We aim to help clients recognize their own strengths and empowering them to overcome obstacles. And we've said this before, empathy. Staff are able to listen and empathize with clients while helping them overcome these challenges. This creates safe spaces for everyone and allows them to feel heard and helped and valued. We always offer support. And I want to go back to saying offer, right? I think that in this work, especially when we're working and helping individuals, there's many misconceptions that folks want all of this support that we're providing. I really work with our staff on how to create an environment where we're offering our services and allowing our clients to be able to pick the care that best supports them. After all, they're the experts in their own lives, right? So it's important to take note that not all clients want or need this kind of support. Meeting clients where they're at is how we show compassion to the individual situation and provide them with specific support. And I want to end with just this beautiful quote of true compassion means not only feeling others' pain, but being moved to help relieve it. I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Jill. Wonderful, wonderful presentations. Thank you all three experts for lending your time and sharing with us all the information. We are on time to break at 2:35, so maybe I can share this one last slide of what I've prepared for today. I was going to skip it for later on because after the break, we will come back for question and answer after the next round of experts who will be, the panel will be moderated by Professor Guo. I just want to kind of leave a quote right here in Chinese, 前人种树，后人纳凉, or 后人乘凉. In English, it's translated into, we plant the trees for those after us. So we do the work now. We always do the work now. It's almost like that Piaget watch commercial, if you remember. It's an expensive watch that you never own, but you take care of it for your next generation. So I see volunteer work, compassion-driven work, as in something that we're doing now for people who will reap the benefits after us. But I want to add something of my very own. While doing this work for people behind us, why don't we also enjoy the process? Why don't we also enjoy nurturing the plant grow, watching it successfully, healthily thrive towards the sun? That's my little note to end our presentation of the panelists this first segment. Thank you, Professor Guo, for you to take over, please.
Okay, thank you, Joanne. So, well, let's take a 10 minutes full break, okay? Let's come back on 2:40, okay? So now we start break time. Now it's 2:30 p.m. in Los Angeles time. Let's come back on 2:40. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gore. So excellent presentation so far.
Thank you, Dr. Ta,
Yeah.
our president of University of the. Thank you.
See you later.
See you. Good afternoon, everyone. Now it's Los Angeles, 2:40 p.m. And we will resume our panel and begin our second part of the topic, challenges of the compassionate aging in the field. And in the second part, we invite three panelists to share their vision and their experience in the field. The first one, we invite Venerable Di Hong, doctor. Dr. Di Hong has been the adjunct professor at the University of the West many years. And he also devoted himself to the prison chaplaincy work over 20 years. So we are so lucky to invite Venerable Dr. Di Hong to share his experience. Okay, Venerable Di Hong, do you want to share your screen now?
Yes, please.
Yeah, you can do it now.
Okay. So my work has been inside California state prisons for the past 11 years. Give me 1 second. Much of what I do certainly related to the work of the two prior speakers. I'm sorry, I forgot the name, Gio and Mario. I will fly by quickly because I have 35 slides, and if you guys would like the PowerPoint, let me know, or contact Dr. Ko, I can send it to him. So basically, the nonprofit that I worked with is called Engaged Buddhist Alliance. It was initiated by Dr. Lancaster back in 2013. And right now, I'm in 3 prisons, the women's prison in Chino, a men's prison at Lancaster, that's level 3 and level 4, and a prison in Blythe, it's called Ironwood State Prison, which is level 2 and level 3. Actually, right now, I just got checked into a hotel, which is 250 miles from my house, in a prison called, I'm going to go inside a prison tomorrow. It's called Valley State Prison, which is a level 2. Just quickly, what I do is inside the prison, once I get into the chapel, I talk for a little bit, for like 15 minutes or so. We would meditate for usually an hour, and then I would leave the time for folks to share their experiences or questions. I usually bring in printouts and books just so that I don't have to talk that much, because if whatever that I say, to be honest, like people will forget, but when they have something on hands, they will remember. The one good thing about my project or my prison visit is that if the incarcerated person comes to my visit, if they have 54 hours, they will receive 10 days off of their sentences. So for the women's prison, because I go every Monday, for 1 year, the women would, each one of them would receive 20 days off their sentences. We also offer correspondence courses on the Buddha's teaching and mindfulness meditation. I also correspond with men in most of the California's prisons and also in 13 other states. So just quickly, to give you a context of my challenges is that just to let you guys know of the mass incarceration issue. Right now, not right now, but this is from the past year. We had 1.9 million people in state prison, federal prisons, county jails, juvenile, halls, and immigration detention center, plus some 80 Indian county jails. The cost system-wide, nationwide, is $182 billion. And as great as we are, we incarcerated 583 people per 100,000. At least 1 in 4 persons, go to jail within the same year. And most of them are dealing with poverty, mental illness, substance use disorder, whose problems would get worse once they're incarcerated. This is just a slide of what I just said. And the cost per person at the federal level, this is from 2022, was $42,672 per year. And here's the thing. Once this is from the federal prison, once they get out, 49.3% of them would get back into prison, and of which 31.7% would be convicted and sent into prison, and 24.6%, would be incarcerated. And folks under 20 who were released before they come of age of 21, their chances of being rearrested was 67.6. Now on to California State Prison. California has, back to federal prisons. California has 13 federal prisons. And so in terms of California State Prisons, we have 32, 2 of which are women's prison, 1 in Chino, 1 in Chowchilla, which is I'm in right now. And as of September 11, 2024, there were 92,024 people inside the prison, and 88,000 of them were men, and 3,700 were women. And also almost 35,000 people were on parole. And here's the budget for this year, $14.5 billion, which translated into the cost of incarcerated 1 person is $132,860. Taxpayers keep voting for, because of the political rhetoric, and I'm not being political, because of the fear, this and that, and we keep approving for propositions that will keep sending people into prisons. We just passed Prop 36. I haven't gone into the detail, but as far as I was told, more people will get sent to prison, which is not a working issue. And here's the other issue. Back from 2018 and 2019, 42% of people released were rearrested. And of those, 20.9% were convicted, and 21.1% were convicted of a misdemeanor. And so far, of my 11 years volunteering in the prison, I have met quite a few people being rearrested. So 2 of them I have worked with for years. And so why do people get into trouble or committed crimes? Poverty. That's the first reason. If you look at the slide here, most of the people who committed crimes because of poverty, they may average less than $20,000 per year. And here's the other injustice. This is from, I guess, 2021. In California, the Black population was only 5%, but inside state prison, they made up 28%. In county jails, they made up 21%. This is just in California. The other reason is because of trauma. The 2 previous speakers spoke of trauma. The folks inside the prison, they all suffer trauma. I will give you the stats later. And it was either physical, mental, sexual abuse, neglect, abandonment, or they witnessed domestic violence. And all of this led them to either joining the gangs or substance use, and then also with mental or physical issues. A lot of them have learning disability. And this is from Dr. Gabor Mate. If you haven't read his books, I highly recommend. He published a lot of books, the latest being The Myth of Normal. And he said, people inside the prison is the most traumatized and marginalized in our culture. They suffer trauma at home. And then once they get into trouble, they get into prison, they suffer more trauma. And here's the stat. According to Compassion Prison Project, 64% of the US population has at least one form of ACE, meaning adverse childhood experience. And folks inside the prison, 98% of them suffer more than one type of ACEs. And here's the consequences of trauma. The first column is the type of trauma that they suffer. The second is the health risk and the issue that they have. And then the last column is the long-term consequences. And it can be physical illness, cancer, or mental health issues. And this is from a study, and trauma, so people, in a family household, they suffer trauma not just from home, but it's the environment, it's the community. That's why the author, Dr. Elias and her colleagues, they reframe the ACEs, it is the tree here represent a household. The ground is the environment, which is also causing more trauma. And if you want to read about the stories of folks inside the prison, you can go to healingdharmas.org, which is a friend of mine funded this website. I have a lot of stories from the folks inside the prison who suffer from trauma. So basically, just a quick thing of what I offer. Basically, the Buddha's teaching. I tell people think of the Buddha not as a religious figure, but as a psychological figure, like Freud, William James, Carl Rogers, or even some of the modern psychologists. And if you look at the Buddha's teaching, most of his teachings were basically trauma-informed. That's why I call it trauma-informed Dharma. And I also, since I meditate, the form of meditation that I bring in is mindfulness. And I also came up with this because I taught Buddhist psychology to graduate and undergrad. For anyone, you can look at this list and see which type of trauma that you have. So how do I know that the Buddha's teaching and meditation work for the incarcerated population? And this is all all evidence. These are not my opinion. If you read The Deepest Well by Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, she said mindfulness is the antidote to ACEs. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote the book The Body Keeps a Score, and he suggests that mindfulness is the direct way to healing trauma. Again, Dr. Gabor Mate, he said mindfulness practices have had the documented benefits of reducing inflammation and basically healing the brains and be helping the traumatized individuals to be mindful, to be in touch with their emotions. And also the book Author Trace, in which chapter 10, it said, meditation as psychotherapy. And also MBCT, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, cut relapse in severe depression by 50%. There is a book on that, which I just bought a couple of weeks ago. And from the neuroscience report, mindfulness meditation help people to, the meditator or the participants to heal their brains. And also, this is just an article that was published on October 10. Mindfulness is found to be as effective as the leading antidepressant in treating anxiety without the side effects. So why do we need to help them? Why should we, or do we need to help the incarcerated population? Because 95% of them, read any study, 95% of the incarcerated population in state and federal, they will come home. They could be your neighbor. So like if we don't help them, how are they going to come back considering prison is even more traumatizing? So here's my challenge, right? I can't find volunteers. Of the 11 years that I've been in, I only have one who helps me once a month at the women's prison. The rest of the prisons, I went in alone, even like driving 252 miles up here. I drove by myself and I don't like driving. And also most of the Buddhist nonprofits that I have known, a few of them, they open, they close, once the person or the people there retire or pass away, they couldn't find help. So my point is that I urge people to get out of your comfort zone. I'm not here to lecture you what compassion is, read into what the Buddha taught about compassion, loving kindness. And if you're not, once you get out of comfort zone, figure out how you can help. And if you're not comfortable going to prison, which is understandable, spread the word, get other people involved, or a couple other alternatives, like figure out how to help kids or adults who have been traumatized. How do they heal? How can they process their trauma and heal from it? And a lot of the Buddha's teaching and the practices can help. Or also the other thing, because kids were traumatized at home, so like how can we educate parents? Because like we can't tell parents what to do, but if we can educate parents or potential parents about trauma and its consequences, just so that when people give birth to kids, they are mindful and aware of what kind of harm they could inflict on their kids. Growing up in Vietnam, a lot of the Asian culture, beating up kids is normal, but it's not. And also going back to the Buddha's stories, right? Two of them,
You still have 1 minute. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, I'm almost done. And Gulimala, who killed 999 people, the Buddha was the next one that he was about to kill, but he was touched by the Buddha's compassion and wisdom, and he dropped his intention. He became a monk and achieved enlightenment. And then Prince Ajatasattu, who killed his father to take over the throne. And he actually came to the Buddha and confessed, and the Buddha accepted him, allowed him to become the Buddha's late disciple. So the point is, this is our best chance to bring the Buddha's teaching and practices to those in need and also to those in our communities. With that, thank you.
Thank you, Venerable. You provide a very insights of we call prison championship. Next speaker, we invite Professor Tom Morris. Tom, professor is also an adjunct professor at the University of the West, teaching law and upper division course in general education, divinity, and psychology. He actually grew up in the San Gabriel Valley around us and began doing environmental service. And since then, he also has been involved several agencies on federal, state, and local level, work on the environmental natural resource conservation. So now we invite Professor Morris to share his experience in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kuo. So my name is Tom Moritz, and I'm an adjunct professor for, I think, this might be my 13th year. I haven't actually gone back. I also have to stipulate that I may be the oldest person in this whole program. And on my opening screen, I hope you all can see that clearly. Oh, let me pop it up so it's a little more. Hopefully, it get up. There we go. that's actually a picture of the San Gabriel Mountains, which is the view we get from the University of the West. And as a teenager, and I hate to confess, but it was in the 1950s, I worked up there in those mountains doing trail work. And I've been involved with the San Gabriel Mountains in a variety of ways ever since. I also want to say that it's truly humbling to be here with all you panel members. And it may not seem obvious, but I have been engaged with all the different themes that were treated today and have been treated so far, every one of them. And I have personal experience in all of those areas. And that's enough because I'm not here to talk about that. So let's see what we have to look at here. So first, to stipulate that in talking about ecology or in the environment, I'm basing much of what I have to say in the first precept, which is fundamentally reverence for life. My teacher, Bhikkhu Bodhi, describes the 5 precepts as harmless, honest, faithful, truthful, and sober. He has a single word for each one of them. And so harmlessness, but I like reverence for life better, because it includes what we've heard a little bit already from some of our other speakers today, because it includes biophilia, which means a genuine love for other living things, plants and animals, by the way, all of the above. And the second point, the second fundamental Buddhist value is equanimity, which is the 4th of the Brahma Viharas, or divine abodes, upekkha in Pali, which I translate to incorporate or include dimensions of homeostasis, that is our physiological balance, equilibrium, actually physical balance as well, ecological balance, and then relative stability. And I say relative stability because ultimately the earth, as we know from a Buddhist perspective, is not stable. But nevertheless, that's the basis for what I would like to say here. And by the way, what I'm talking about has sometimes been called eco psychology, but it's actually much, much more than that. I also need to stipulate that these observations are based in a philosophical position called neutral monism, which basically just means that I don't believe in a binary view of the material and the mental, or the conscious and the physical. But I believe there's synergy that, and I believe we've already heard that from several of the presenters, that occurs between our minds, our bodies, and our experience of the world. And by the way, the human body is an ecosystem. It's not separate somehow from the environment. So, what's the problem here? Welcome to the Anthropocene. This is the first time in world history that an ecological era has been defined by a single species, and that species is us, Homo sapien. And what you're seeing on the screen in front of you is a footprint. It's a footprint from Laetoli, Tanzania. It's 3,666,000 years old. It's the first evidence we have of human or a proto-human bipedality, that is walking on 2 legs. And actually, a close study has revealed that it seems to have been a family dyad, probably a male, a female, and a child, walking through volcanic ash. So in a very literal way, this is the very first human imprint on the earth, but this was harmless, but it's gotten much, much worse. And I'm going to be talking about that as we go forward. So this is probably the most important single evidence, or it's the primary evidence that's developed in our modern era of the basis for climate change. This is done by a scientist named James Hansen. He began recording this data in 1958 at Mauna Loa in Hawaii, and it represents the increase in CO2 in our atmosphere up until, it looks like about, on this graph, until about 2012. And you can see there's been a steady increase in the amount of CO2 that's going into the atmosphere. If you're wondering what that little jagged line is, that's because there's seasonality in the addition of CO2 to the climate. So, and here is why this is an issue. This is a graph of what we call greenhouse gases. Carbon dioxide constituting 81% of the greenhouse trace gases in the atmosphere, methane which comes from us and other animals, and then nitrous oxide, and finally a small group of fluorinated gases. These are the culprits. These are the problems. These are the additions to our atmosphere that, strangely enough, are triggering the global warming that we are experiencing right now. The climate change. Climate change is actually a term of art that's more accurate, because it includes heat, cold, and a whole variety of the other elements that have resulted. And here is a brief. To me, this is very dramatic. Let's see if we can make this play. I think we can. I'm going to try here.
Maybe you need to run.
Okay. All right. What you're seeing is the addition of CO2 to the atmosphere starting in January of 2006. This is produced by NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. The red colors indicate very high concentrations of CO2 going up into the atmosphere. And remember, this is the winter time. And if we were to play through the entire slide, which I'm not going to do, we would see that by spring and summer, CO2 is diminishing because plants are coming out, and plants are acting as a sink for carbon dioxide. All right. I think that's quite an amazing image. So what are the consequences of greenhouse gases? There are many. These are some of the indicators of a warming world. This includes melting of sea ice, ocean heat content increasing, sea surface temperatures increasing, sea level rising, temperature over the oceans increasing, water vapor, more water vapor going up into the air, air temperatures near surface. By the way, last year was the hottest year in human history, and this year is going to be even hotter. Glaciers and ice sheets are melting, including in mountainous areas like the Himalayas, but also in Antarctica and in the Arctic. Snow cover is diminishing, and temperature over land is increasing. All of the above and more, much, much more. So that's a very brief representation of the dilemma. This, in a single slide, captures very, very effectively, I think, the entire pattern of climate change. And by the way, this comes from a source that I'll mention in just a second, the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It's an organization at international scale involving scientists from every nation on Earth. They have involved tens of thousands of scientists. They have published hundreds of thousands of papers. They were founded in 1988 by the World Meteorological Association and the UN Environmental Program. And their reports are our best single source for information about climate change. I'm not going to go through this. By the way, I didn't mention, I teach a series of 3 courses at UWest, and I've been doing this work for over 40 years. So I'm trying to compress all of that into a 15-minute presentation, which is a real challenge. But I invite you to look more closely. Basically, this reflects the Earth systems that are producing climate change, starting with greenhouse gases and concentrations of greenhouse gas emissions that produce temperature change and a variety of other factors. And then, oh, I'm sorry. I seem to have lost my... There we go. I think we're there. Sorry. There we go. Sorry, I didn't realize. And so we're looking at a series of physical changes occurring in our world, and then a whole series of impacts, which start out affecting things as simple as ecosystems or as complex as ecosystems and water resources, but then also having a whole large consequence of impacts on us, on humanity. This is the source that I recommend to you. It's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and the link on this slide refers you to their sixth assessment report. They've issued 6 since 1988, and they are preparing to issue their 7th. It's for the gold standard for information on climate change. So, in addition to climate change is the most extreme current manifestation of human disruption of the natural world. But we've also long had impacts, disproportionate impacts on the global environment. I think this is a lovely image of human hunters. And why do I mention that? This is Los Angeles, probably 15 to 20,000 years ago. 80% of the animals depicted in this picture are extinct. And to the best of our knowledge, they're extinct because of our impact. There were other factors, and it's not hard, fast science yet, but almost certainly the human impact resulted in, if you can even glimpse this, there's an ancient buffalo, there's a saber-toothed cat, giant ground sloths that were vegetarians, 10 feet tall, mammoths, mastodons, all of these animals, horses and camels here in Southern California, they're all gone, and almost certainly gone because of our impact. And we continue to have drastic impacts on ecosystems worldwide. And again, I don't have the time here to go through all these elements, but ecosystem services are fundamental to our life. Perhaps one of the most obvious ones for all of us is clean air, clean water. But sometimes things as maybe perhaps not as obvious as pollinators, bees. I saw a report just 2 days ago that millions of bees are killed by vehicles on our roads every day. And bees are essential for our survival. We cannot have the food systems we depend on without bees. So what is my point here? Ultimately, and this is where I think I tie back to everything that's been presented this morning and this afternoon. Ecosystems are inextricably linked to human well-being. This is a report that was published by the World Resources Institute in 2005, but it's still very useful and very valid. It's freely available. Climate change and other forms of ecological disruption are best understood as threats to the health of all beings, certainly including human beings. And by the way, certainly including our mental health, our mental stability. Environmental despair is a major contributor to suicidality in our country and actually worldwide. And there's no doubt that a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being is a good definition of health, but we cannot think about physical, mental, and social well-being without considering the world environment in which we all live and upon which we all depend. So I'm going to very quickly, I hope, just note that, again, that looking at the first Buddhist precept, that harmful means disruptive, degrading, or destructive impacts of human activity on the environment. And I believe we can consider that harmful behavior as violent. Why do I make that point? Because I'm drawing in a typology of violence from the World Health Organization. I'm not going to address all these separate elements except to note that violence occurs, the violence being looked at is physical, sexual, psychological, and also includes deprivation and neglect. These have all been addressed by other speakers this morning. And here we talk about personal, subjective, self-directed violence at all of these levels, but also interpersonal violence within the family, within the community, and ultimately collective violence. This study by the World Health Organization is very well worth examining. And here's a different schematic representing the same question. But what I've added to this analysis is that violence also occurs environmentally, and it has consequences at each of these separate levels. Believe it or not, these are all consequences of environmental violence, environmental disruption, and they produce a deep and profound sense of environmental despair. I'll close by saying that a few years ago, probably 8 years ago, I had a student in one of my environmental leadership class, and I had been discounting her. She was sitting at the back of the class. She had her face in her device, as our students sometimes do, And I'd sort of been thinking, oh, she's not present. She's not paying attention. And then after about 6 or 7 classes, she put up her hand at the end of class and said, I'm just wondering if it's worth having children in this world. And I'll tell you what, guys, it knocked me back. And I'll tell you what I did. And this is one of the beautiful aspects of the University of the West, is that day I went to the director, a director of the chaplaincy program, and I said, I would like to have a joint meeting with the chaplains and with my environmental leadership class. And we did that the next week. And we talked about environmental despair, and we had the scientific dimension and the spiritual dimension. And that's one of the great gifts of our university is we have the size, the flexibility. We can be nimble in responding to all forms of crisis. And that's a tremendous, tremendous advantage.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so here's my wrap up. Thank you, Dr. Kuo. I've got it. The goal of all conservation activities should be to minimize harm and to restore health at all scales. So thank you. And by the way, that's one of our past neighbors here in Southern California. That's P22, who lived up in the Hollywood Hills near Griffith Park Observatory. He's gone now. Died, unfortunately, as a result of roadkill.
Oh,
But thank you for the time. Thank you so much.
thank you, Tom. You gave us a very excellent knowledge base about natural resource and conservative management. Next, we invite Venerable Jue Ji. And Venerable Dr. Jue Ji is a Bohuangshan monastic member. Currently, she's stationed in Austin, Texas. And she also worked for us for University of the West in the past. So we invite her to talk about how the Master Xing Yun, the vision about human Buddhism in terms of the compassionate action. So Venerable Jue Ji, please. Venerable Jue Ji, you didn't turn on microphone. Your microphone.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Good afternoon from Los Angeles. It is my pleasure and honor to be invited to present Master Xing Yun's vision of human service. And in this panel, we have heard scholars, professors from different disciplinary to talk about ecology, to talk about domestic violence, and Venerable Di Hong talks about his experience in prison, helping people there. And so I really learned a lot from this kind of interdisciplinary communication. And so today I'm going to introduce you Master Xing Yun's vision of human service. That all has to do with what we have discussed today. And Venerable Master Xing Yun, he is a great Buddhist master. He is also the founder of University of the West. And in his idea, he says that that we should advocate the form of Buddhism, which is entitled as humanistic Buddhism. And so this is what he defined as humanistic Buddhism. He says what a Buddha, humanistic Buddhism is what a Buddha taught and what people need, and which purifies our human mind, and that which will lead us to a virtuous and beautiful life. So I sort of rethink about what he defines about humanistic Buddhism, and I think that what the Buddha taught, he sort of want to access to go back to what the original teaching of the Buddha, and which shows authenticity, and what people need means what we concerns about human issues. And the approach is to purify human behavior and human speech and human mind. And so he advocated the three acts of goodness. Then finally, it's the what is virtuous and what is beautiful, and this should be regarded as the value of advocating humanistic Buddhism. So first, the Buddha's teaching should be the base or the foundation of our doing all kinds of human service. And this book that I showed on the slides here is entitled Buddha Dharma Pure and Simple, which includes not only the Buddha's fundamental teaching, but also how Venerable Master Xing Yun would use that, adopt that to apply the Buddha Dharma in daily life practice. And so, say, for example, Master Xing Yun often says that Buddha is in my mind. So it seems that me and the Buddha, they are two, and then he put Buddha in the mind. But then he says that we should claim ourselves as I am Buddha. So I and the Buddha are two in one. Okay? And with that two in one, then when it manifests in our speech, in our behavior, in our thinking, then we are doing what, as a Buddha, what we should do. So the guidelines would be 5 precepts, 6 paramitas for embracing dharmas, etc. And so what the Buddha taught in Venerable Master Xing Yun's definition, it's not only the exact the text that we learned from early Buddhism, but also that he sort of bring that to life, how to apply that in daily life. And we, as the person who learn Buddhism and practice Buddhism, and we should behave like what the Buddha did when he was there in in ancient India. The second one is our concern. This is the scope of the human world, and this is also the scope of what we as humanistic Buddhism practitioner, what our concern should be about. And I put it as mindfulness will be the practice. And in for Guangshan, we emphasize on living Chan. So you can see that in meditation, not only in the meditation room, but also outside in your own house, you can do that. And in tea ceremony, we emphasize tea Chan, okay, that in a cup of tea, you can also taste that kind of Chan taste. And that can be a kind of mindful practice. But nowadays, the people suffer a lot from not only physical illness, but more important, more serious is mental illness that we discussed today, and which includes stress, worries, anxiety, frustration, depression, and low self-esteem. And this, as a monastic serving in a branch temple in America, I also come across people, and especially young people, they come to the temple with their parents and then finding no future, no hope. And so this is quite an issue, especially after COVID-19. And how are we going to deal with that? Okay,
Venerable JG, your microphone being cut off.
okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So that as a practitioner of humanistic Buddhism, we would suggest that when we help others, then wisdom must be there. And wisdom especially refers to Buddhism wisdom. which is an antidote to ignorance, to all kinds of our negative emotions, like hate, like jealousy, and the Buddha Dharma that should be applied in our daily life. And how to do that is to integrate the Buddha Dharma in our daily practices, in our eating, working, in getting along with others. In another word, that Master Xing Yun would like all of us to become a full-time practitioner, that 24 hours a day, that you pray like a Buddha. Okay. How am I going to go to the next slide? Sorry. Hmm.
Did you have an arrow to move to next?
Okay. And as we know that Venerable Master Xing Yun, in his old age, he often says to people, "What can I do for you?" And in hearing an old man suffering from his illness, and he still is saying, "What can I do for you?" And we can feel the compassion, the empathy that coming from the bottom of his heart, and he treats all people as equals. Okay? And this is a manifestation, the embodiment of what in Buddhism we emphasize about non-duality, that there is no discrimination between others and myself. He's willing to extend his hands to all. And after that, so this is the scope is there. This is what the people need. And then now next is the approach that he defines as humanistic Buddhism, is to purify our human body and mind. And this is the method that he advocates: 3 acts of goodness: do good deed, speak good words, and think with thoughts. So in our temple event, we organize this kind of event to young kids aged from 5 to 10. And you can see that by the end of the retreat, of the camp, the parents, the young parents, and the kids, they are all very happy. And even that for some of the kids, that they behave very respectfully to the venerables, and then they also know how to respect their parents. And so this is what we say, that that the education of the young kids is very important. And so not only for young people, but also for adults. And so to establish a pure land on earth is also our goal in humanistic Buddhism. And we can learn from the Buddhas, like Amitabha Buddha with 48 great vows, Medicine Buddha with his 12 great vows, and Guan Yin Bodhisattva, or Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva, with his 12 great vows. So in corresponding with the Buddha's and Bodhisattva's great vows, we learn likewise. We want to follow their footprints to apply Buddha Dharma in daily life. And so in being good is what is to be applied in establishing a pure land on earth. So we think positively to do as many good deeds as possible, to develop wholesome deeds as many as possible, just like a Veggie Plan A and Veggie Run, T-Earth projects, that we want to protect the earth. We want to do less killing on earth. And we also promote outreaching projects. For example, in the aspect of education, we organize Buddhism exam, And so let more people to learn about Buddhism. And we also will do Dharma preaching in the army, prisons, hospitals, etc. And which is very important is to organize a taking refuge ceremony that to allow more people to have the chance to become a Buddhist. And we also can organize charity events. So like a food on the wheel, so food offering for refugees, homeless, and the needed. Number 4 is the goal of humanistic Buddhism. The value is virtue and beauty. And then I put to spread kindness is the way how we approach to that goal. So the community building is important to spread our kindness to others. So in our big foreground family, we have a lay group called Buddha's Light International Association, and short in BLIA. So this is a lay community based on the faith that is Buddhism, but also we have friends of Buddhism in this big foreground family. And so that is my conclusion, that actually Venerable Master Xing Yun says his vision about human service is walking on the Bodhisattva path, and humanistic Buddhism is actually a Bodhisattva path. So we talk about compassion, but compassion has to rely on wisdom so that we can walk on the path, the path of Bodhisattva path correctly. And then compassion requires a skillful means to meet all kinds of human needs. And so I would also conclude that Master Xing Yun's vision of humanistic Buddhism is to be a bodhisattva in action and always be ready to help. Like what he said, what can I do for you? And be compassionate, take wisdom as the guide, and apply skillful means to meet human needs. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable Dr. Jue Ji. You actually provide an excellent summary of the Master Xing Yun vision about the human service. Actually, it's one aspect of the how to conduct the compassionate action initiated by the we call devotional labor of the Buddhist organization and the practitioner. So thank you, Venerable Jue Ji. So now we turn to our Q&A section and moderated by the Dr. Kuo. Joy.
Thank you, Dr. Kuo. I hope no one's been confused between the two Dr. Kuos today.
We share the same last name.
We share the same last name. I am so in awe and in feeling so much gratitude with all the information that I'm taking in from all our esteemed panelists. Thank you so much for sharing with us your wisdom, your life experiences, and your passion with your compassion-driven work. I have a little conclusion in my mind while I take some notes here and there. It's that the theme this year, it's about how do we overcome our challenges of compassion. As a Buddhist, non-religious Buddhist growing up, I always believed that doing work for others will be able to help us demonstrate the compassion that we have for others. But at the same time, as a clinical psychologist and a clinician, we in the field cannot stress the importance enough about self-care. So we walk a thin line of doing a lot for others, but at the same time, taking care of ourselves. And today we also learn from Professor Tom Moritz, we want to also take care of the environment. So it's a multi-level and layers of caretaking while we give care. Having that little short conclusion, I would like to open the floor now to everyone who's here. If you have any questions, please go ahead and speak, or you can put it in the chat. Both Dr. Kuos will help to moderate that. Thank you. No questions so far?
Yeah, maybe the question is a very general question. I want everyone speaker can give some share your experience. And we know a lot of time when we engage the society, there's a lot of institutional um, hurdle we need to cross over. And I remember one says, well, it's not very when we conclude, it's more like a political issue, but have anyone can present your idea so-called beyond the we call political issue? What kind of the institutional barrier in your field and you think that is the most challenging? Thank you.
Should we just answer?
I invite every speaker can give us share your experience.
Yeah, I see that Professor Moritz's hand is up too. So, but Dr. Ritaza, go ahead, and then we will go over to Professor Tom Moritz.
Okay. Thank you. I think this is a really important question. And you know, as we know, we talked a lot about different kinds of systems, ecosystems, specifically in my field, which is public health, mental health, behavioral health. Even though certain, you know, a lot of the silos that happen in this work and really all of healthcare. Healthcare really isn't integrated at all, and medical is different from psychological and mental health, which is separate from vision and dental. And we know that you need all to really live a full and robust life. But, you know, one of them is not having access to health insurance. When you don't have access to health insurance, you live in fear, and you're basically you're a few accidents away from ending up on the street, and that you're much closer to becoming houseless here in Los Angeles than you are becoming a billionaire. Another issue is that there's so many. Where do I start? Another issue is that, you know, mental health is in a lot of ways still elusive. You know, there's ways to treat it with different kinds of therapies, and of course we've got things like there's a lot of therapy, there's a lot of evidence-based means of practice, but we're finding that because mental health is very much impacted by culture and cultural beliefs, when you don't have culturally responsive services, people can't relate. On top of that, if you're speaking a different language and services are not provided in those languages, then they're not accessible for you. And so, for instance, you know, in all of LA County, and there are a lot of Chinese people, right? Myself included. I'm Filipino and Chinese, but you know, in all of LA County, I only know of one substance, and they call it substance abuse counselor because that's what their title is. So I'll go with that. There's only one who speaks Mandarin in all of LA County. So, you know, people always ask me, well, how do we get more people to go into behavioral health fields and become clinicians and, you know, also speak another language? Well, you've got to build a culture that accepts that people speak multiple languages. You've got to reward them for sustaining that and holding on to that, right? Because a lot of things here we're taught, like, you know, to assimilate, and that it's more important to speak English more than anything else. And then on top of that, I could keep going. I'm gonna stop talking though, because now you've like triggered. So I'll pass it to you, Professor Tom.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, my new colleague, Marielle. It's very good to hear you. You know, I will add to this. You know, it's possible to look at a map. There are maps, in fact, of Los Angeles County that show distribution by ethnicity, by SES, social economic status, But also at the same time, you can overlay pollution burdens, for example, or in other words, and what I'm talking about here is that there is a structural relationship between vulnerability to environmental harm and your ethnicity, in fact, gender too, by the way. Gender comes into play in a slightly different way, but our class, all of the above. And our system is structurally set up, as we were just hearing, to limit access to the necessary care for the most vulnerable people in our culture, period. And so to me, so I want to be clear, that includes all the types of harm that have been presented today, and it including, by the way, incarceration, but it also includes environmental harms. They're all of the above. And there's a whole field of environmental justice that is making those linkages right now. And so we have huge barriers. And again, I hope the major point of what I said today is really to say that these are all integrated problems. They aren't, environment is not, not isolated from all these other problems. Environmental despair is a real cause of suicidality in this country and of all the other harms that accompany it. So that's enough from Professor Moritz. Sorry.
Thank you, Tom. I see Dr. Venerable Jueqi has her hand on.
Yes, I totally agree with Tom that our environment is very important to our health, physical health and mental health. And well, in some of the presenters, you mentioned about the issue of volunteers. It's very difficult to get volunteers. And in my temple, there is no exception. So my challenge is how to recruit more volunteers and then how to manage my volunteer as my manpower. It's just like you run a company and you never know how many of your employees will show up that day. So it's quite challenging. But I believe that we treat people as that sentient beings, that they have feelings. And so we talk about empathy, that we understand how you feel. So we start from there, that why people are reluctant to be a volunteer, because they are not yet there to feel how people in need feel, right? So therefore, we sort of help these people understand that there are so many people around us that need help. And not only people, but also the environment need help. And so this is how I approach to people. I talk to them and listen to them. And then we try to come up with a consensus that we both need help, and we can also both can become helper to help others. And this kind of bodhisattva ideas of helping others is the same as helping ourselves. And not to mention that to be a volunteer, you come up with, you get the sense of achievement that you are able to help others. And so I would like to encourage you guys, if you are running out of volunteers, don't be discouraged. You just need a right conditions, and then also that you need to create that kind of conditions to allow people to know what you need. Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable Jueqi. I was also thinking along those lines, when we want to role model, where do we role model? At home, in a community? I feel that the famous saying of charities begins at home. It's a great saying. So when we role model, our people in our lives would see that how enjoyable or fruitful or rewarding that experience can be. And therefore, we hopefully pass down the intrinsic motivation to them. I really like your reminder, Venerable, about the 3 good deeds, the 做好事说好话, what is the thing good thought? What is the Chinese one? But the
很
good
好
deeds,
心
很好心. Okay, so the good deeds, the good thoughts, and the good words. If we can use those to help lead us, we don't necessarily have to convert into Buddhist, for everyone. But I feel that by using those guidelines from the Buddha, that will always remind us that, is that out of good intent? Is that out of good thought? Are we doing a good deed? And then hopefully by role modeling, starting from home, that we'll be able to motivate others to join the line of volunteering. I see Dr. Ta has her hand up. Dr. Ta is our president of the University of the West.
No. Hello, everyone. Thank you. I first of all want to thank you all the presenters. I think, and thank you the two organizers, particularly Dr. Gore and Dr. Kwok. Am I saying correctly? For bringing such a diverse presentation, addressing not only mental health, domestic violence, issue of social injustice, climate changes, humanistic in the context of humanistic Buddhism. I think as University of the West, we have a long way to go, but I'm proud with the fact that Venerable Xing emphasized on using humanistic Buddhism as a way of developing soft skills that many education institutions in America are not addressing. Liberal arts university tend to be overlooked because people are getting so practical. They want an education that yield a career, and neglect of the issue of we need to grow human beings that have a sense of compassion. Not wisdom itself is not enough, but you need to have a sense of compassion and empathy, and the commitment to the world. It's not we don't live on Earth individually, and I hope that this presentation to me, conference or discussion, would allow me to really think about actually the direction of University of the West moving forward. As I say, we have to be I'm glad that we're able to educate the student that we educate, and really nurturing them with the aspect of having compassion and empathy. But we still need to work harder. And for humanistic Buddhism, it's a practice. It's not just enough to be reciting Dharma, but then that practice, we cannot avoid talking about politics, because when there is so much social injustice, it's very difficult to ask for volunteerism. And that is the reality. So that's, I think, a discussion that we can further discuss in the future. It's like you cannot have peace. Peace is only a moment of peace if you don't solve injustice, social inequality. And I can see that encouraging people to volunteer, at the same time, we really need to confront the reality of social inequality and social injustice. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ta. I just want to also remind all of us that we can also do paid work out of compassion-driven kind of motives. I love my job. I love what I'm doing. And I'm sure my colleagues here, Allison, Jill, and Dr. Ritaza, love their jobs. And we are being paid, thankfully. Dr. Ritaza?
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, because I think about volunteer work all the time, and working with interns as well. And I absolutely agree. It's so hard to ask for folks to volunteer their time because of a number of reasons. People don't have time. They're working many jobs. People are struggling. people can barely take care of themselves. So what do they have left to offer when they've got so very little? And on top of that, there is this belief that I think, generally, that if you are a good person, that you should always do free things out of the goodness of your heart. And, in a society and in a country where we value things through money, people end up getting exploited for their experiences, for sharing them, and nobody ever thanks them. Nobody ever pays them. And so, I'm on all of these committees. I get flown out to DC and Sacramento and to all these places that the government flies me to be at. And we always talk about these issues. Well, we want more people to attend. And it's like, well, are you going to pay them? And the answer is always a resounding no. So when people who are the most impacted and who resonate most with volunteer work, because they're being served by, the same volunteers, how do we ask the same people who are being harmed to fix the issue? It doesn't work that way.
Thank you, Dr. Ritaza. We have another session coming up at 4 o'clock, but maybe we can hear from Jill before we wrap this up.
No, I was going to add on that, because I know that as we're talking about interning and volunteering, it is also something that's going to be crucial for us in social services in the next 4 years. We don't know, our funding to our services and our work is the first to be cut. We are, education funding is the first to be cut. And unfortunately, we're going to have some difficult and horrible conversations of how do we continue to do the work that drives us and is compassionate and gives us the worth that we seek for ourselves without the funds. Right. And as someone who is a director of a program, I understand how difficult that's going to be and how much we rely on the people who give. I think for us, it's going to be about how we uplift those who can volunteer, who can support, because we're going to be stretched. I think that's not just a reality for our organization. I think that's across the board, And so I think if anything we take from here is that we are going to need to access that compassion for the individual who needs those services. We're going to need to access ourselves as folks with lived experience to be able to support those who are currently going through it, right? So I think that's, as I'm hearing that's something that I'm sitting with, on how important it is for those who can volunteer and can give to support organizations and systems, education systems, and support the work for us, right?
I wholeheartedly agree. Professor Kuo, maybe we should plan on the next one soon to discuss all these issues.
Yeah, we will find more time, Sorry for this time, because this curriculum is global related, and the next panel in Asia will begin soon. So thank you, everyone, include our presenter and all the graduate students in the morning. Everyone do the good job to sharing your thought and the experience to everyone. And that is the whole purpose. We organize these two panels. We need to ground it, our compassionate component of what we call humanity Buddhism in our real life. So to some extent, it's more like a practical aspect of the humanist Buddhism. Thank you, everyone. And I hope everyone enjoy this. And we hope we can have a next chance to talk to each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good evening. Thank you.